conversation has been about mastery and realization of mastery.
How does one continue on spiritual practice path and still maintain their obligations and conditions in the world?
Well, it was great effort for the most part, because there would seem to be a dichotomy going on there for people who are entering the, let's say, the spiritual life. There seems to be a dichotomy. Ultimately there is no dichotomy. Realization is not another thing. When you're talking about spiritual practice, it's not another thing. It is what is. And we have to get to that point eventually, inevitably, of understanding what it is that it is, see? And so we're talking then about realization. Another word, another symbol, another, say, interpretational sort of process. What does realization mean? What's the definition of it? Let's say it defies definition, but yet it is a word. See? So we have a paradox here, and that's going to be pretty much the fact of the process. See? When we're talking about depending upon the mind, or the intelligence, or the intellect, or the self-thought mind of the individual. It's paradoxical, because it is and it isn't at the same time, simultaneously.
When we look at the, let's say, the material world, do those same paradoxes exist?
They're all the same. However, in the material world, if we're going to be able to make a distinction here that's useful to anybody, that means assuming that the material world is the real world, then that's not the real world, but you don't know that yet. See? Unless your intuition or recognition, your intelligence informs you that the material world, the functional world, is not the real world or the only world. In other words, it's a set of appearances, a set of perceptions. And there may be misperceptions as you go along the path, and you see these misperceptions. It really depends on what gives you pain, if there is such a thing in your case. And then you work from what gives you pain, and then from that you realize, well, people who suffer want to have money. If they don't have money, then they want to have money, thinking that, well, that's the answer to their suffering. That might take care of some of the suffering, but money's never the answer. Money can't buy you realization, it can't buy you love, it can't buy you life. In some cases it seems to, because you can buy body parts, so you're extending your life. Okay? So we're saying, yeah, that's true, but it's also not true. Yeah. Can't buy you happiness. Although, that's relative. See, it depends on the person. Say, well, this makes me happy, give me some candy, give me some junk food, that makes me happy. See? Give me some pain, I'm happy. If you give me some pain, I'll be in bliss. See? So it really depends on the individual. No quick solutions to that. So it depends on the perception of the individual karma, and where they are on the path of self-transcended realization. And that again is symbolic and requiring deeper definition of sort of structuring, so people have a better understanding of what that might mean to themselves. Then we're talking about comprehension, so whether or not a person can comprehend what it is. See, if they need to comprehend. And this is also an important aspect as well. What is the level of the intelligence of the individual? That can determine how far they go, how deep they go, how high they go, how far out they go, how far in they go, and so on. It's about intelligence and vision then, or how you hear.
So how would you respond to the well-known saying that love of money is the root of all evil?
Ignorance is the root of all evil. Some blame sex and want to blame any number of things, guns these days. It's really ignorance. Ignorance is the problem. So ignorance has to be outlawed. See, that has to be legislated. And the best way to do that is educate people. Give them complete education from let's say, the state of ignorance to enlightenment, whatever that means. So ensoundment, as I would call it here. And when the government is behind that process saying, oh, what are you saying, Tisziji? Should we have a socialistic system? And say, well, you're making it sound bad. See, making education free to all the peeps doesn't mean there's socialism going on by our standards. That means by other people's standards might be socialism. No, we're into intelligentism. Intelligenceism means you want to make sure everybody gets the full education without excuses. And you have a higher nation, that's really in the nation's best interest. You don't want to sabotage that process of selfishness, self-interestedness. See, what's at stake is the nation's level of functioning in the world. When that's the case, then you want to do everything you can to educate the people. See, give it to them. Make it available to the people. See, that's, to me, good government. You're not taking anything away from the people. What you're doing is eliminating, let's say, the question of education. See? And whether or not people are able to, according to their karma, be educated to the fullness. The government should grant people that, and everybody's lifted up by it, because everybody knows more, everybody's more reasonable, maybe more rational, maybe more intelligent. See? So already there's a solution to it, but we don't know that the humans, right, the egos of the nation are ready to deal with that properly without bias and prejudice.
So would you make a distinction between material world education and spiritual education?
I would make a distinction. Yeah, there is such a thing as a distinction. It's a matter of focus. You got an external focus or internal focus. It's that simple.
Are the teachings for one set of conditions at odds with the other? Is material education at odds with the spiritual education?
No, they're just different levels of the same thing. They go hand in hand. You got a body, you got to function in the world, and that's all you need to know about it. So you need to be able to know how to operate your body. That means your body and its mind, and how to function in the world. That's the bottom line. Higher functioning implies more spiritual and maybe more creative sort of capacity. More intelligence usually means not more information, but more recognition. And that should also imply intuitive recognition as well. And beyond that, dealing with paradoxes and making that a norm, not a problem.
So is the pursuit or creation of material wealth at odds with spiritual development?
No, because it's not anything. Spiritual development is all-inclusive. In truth, it's all-inclusive. It enables you to do whatever you have to do to the fullest. If it's true spiritual intelligence that you're developing, then you're not going to make more out of, let's say, the pursuit of materialism, if you want to call it that, or making money, than being, a compassionate being. And so then we have to bring into the mix a sense of what selfishness is and what selflessness is, and how those apparently two extremes come together in what we would call a more sacred approach to life, where there's more reverence for life, not a political idea of God, but more reverence for life as it is already. See? Respect, see? And dignity, which are pretty common words that resonate properly with people of, let's say, higher intelligence. See? Life positive, not life negative. See?
So are the, let's say, compromises required to create material wealth at odds with?
Well, listen, this is about mastery. This is not about, the marketplace compromises. This is really about mastery and understanding that, you need to understand your human nature, basically, human nature. See? And then the system of, let's say, applying theories about compromise may come into perspective relative to what it is you feel you need to do and what it is you need to give up to do it. So it's not about compromise, although that's part of it. Service, which you can call compromise. What is your service? There's your compromise. But then if it's your service, it's not really a compromise. It's what you're here to do. And that means share. So then that becomes the case. So it's not really about that. See? It's about understanding what your nature is, and then from that you know how to better do whatever it shows up as, whether it's sharing, service, or compromise, or anything else.
So getting back to the education aspect, do you see a way to, let's say, create a curriculum that leads to mastery?
Well, easily. You can easily do that. It really depends on what the focus is. So we can have, let's say, self-mastery courses, basically plain and simple. Communication courses. how to master your communication, not how to persuade people. I mean, you could say that's maybe part of the mix, how to persuade people. It's not about persuading and manipulating people. It's about being true. I think it's really, self-mastery has to do with what is being true, not so much to your neuroses and all the problems you have and the things that you have in terms of psychological confusion and all the rest of that. But I'm doing that first. See, working with that first, because you inherit that through your blood. You want to work with that first, see, because it's important to recognize what that is in yourself and in others. See, that's the cause. See, we're talking about root causes with born. See, it's root cause, born. See. And then we want to bring enlightenment to that, because what is born is ignorance. See. See. Spiritual awareness is not born, it's ongoing. So you need to open to what that is and just resonate properly with it. Let it guide you. You have to open up to the light itself. It's not a theory. See, it's not some kind of mystical, perhaps, maybe someday. No, it is present. Depends on what we need to hear and what we need to know for real. See, what we're capable of doing, then absolutely for real. See, because it's a matter of life and death in many cases. What you know can save your life. What you know can save someone else's life. It really depends on whether or not you have the heart to share with them at the right time. But you're not going to have a sense of right time or knowing when if you're caught up in stuff that obstructs that kind of intelligence. So it's really about, let's say, the science of genius, but not just intellectual genius. It's a creative genius, it's spiritual genius as well.
So does, let's say, developing mastery occur all at once in a great flash, or is it a steady accumulation of
Depends on the
skills?
person. Nobody's the same. So that's the same. Nobody's the same. What is the same is difference. Difference of level. So okay, there's no one formula except that everybody has to be included. So the wisdom has to be adapted to everybody. The technology, right, to create better peeps, and every spiritual system is trying to do that. Every psychological system is trying to do that. Every artistic system should be trying to do that, but it doesn't do that. It's not interested in making other people better.
Within mastery, are there different levels acknowledged between masters?
Always. Different levels of intelligence. The difference is already the bottom line. Difference. See? But you need to know what the potential of your difference is. So there's no question about difference. There's no doubt about difference, so it's understood. So it doesn't come up anymore. It's understood. That's why education shows up, to try to make communication possible between the differences. Difference of nation, difference of culture, difference of past, difference of experience, difference of such a blah 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 blah. Difference, right? The God of difference.
So do you think there are ways to offer education on mastery that do not conflict with all the religious?
You got to get people to get behind it in a certain way, a way that could represent an American idealism of self-mastery. And so it's not just about career, it's about who the person is. How well do they know who they are? See? How honest do they need to be? See? How heartful do they need to be? Not heartless. We see a lot of Americans heartless. The gun-toting peeps are heartless peeps, right? Yeah. Heartless. Heartless. They're ready to kill you for no reason at all. See? We have a paranoid sort of agenda now. Complete paranoia. I'm not saying it's unjustified, but how do you undo paranoia? By being similarly paranoid? You have to address paranoia. It's a certain kind of disease. That people are suffering and misperceiving things. And the world is a dangerous place. Nature is dangerous. It's like process. We're here to die, so death is always looming over everybody. So there's a lot to be paranoid about because we don't understand. We need to be made to understand, or be open to learning to understand what the machinery of human nature is about. So instead of teaching just math and science to kids and the alphabet, no, you have to teach human nature at the earliest stages, see, and the value of a human being. You got to teach that right from the get-go. You should learn it in your home, right, where you're born, what culture you're born into. You should learn it there, and then you teach lessons about guns and who deserves to have guns and whether everybody needs a gun. That nobody needs a gun, unless you feel you need a gun. You're not born coming out of the womb saying you need a gun, or you're not going to be happy or, survive. See, right? Gun is a very, very severe reaction to self-defense programming. See? When your life's at risk, then you use a gun. So carrying a gun around just to look like you're a gun-toting person, as if to say, well, you can't get killed, that's that's a delusion. See? Because you have a gun, you can get killed. Depends on whose sights you're in. See? So it's not going to undo a certain amount. It will tend to colorate the process of who kills who first, depending on exactly what the situation is. But it's a paranoid approach to things. See, it's paranoid. It's not trusting. See? It's not trusting. It's not compassionate. It's like not knowing. See? So we're talking about people who just don't know. See? They're letting fear determine their existence in the way of life out here. So that's materialism at its worst. Fear. Justified or not. It's materialism at its worst. Paranoia. It's not psychically correct. It's not open. See? It's not intelligent enough to know that that's something to get beyond. Otherwise, how are you going to be happy that way? Your happiness is very, very trimmed down. See? It's not happiness. It's fear. Sleeping with a gun is fear. It's not happiness. Okay? You're thinking about death in the wrong way then. See? Your concern about death is inappropriate and unwise. It's paranoid. Move on.
So culturally, though, aside from guns, there's a lot of people who don't carry guns who carry a lot of, not even physical, but
That's human nature.
Violence.
That's human nature. You gotta know what human nature is. See, that's gotta be grade one. What is and what isn't human nature? See, what is it? It's human nature to be angry, to suffer. So you gotta go to suffering right away. See, understand that. That's what you inherit. Misery. See, unhappiness, ignorance. It's the key to all of that. Right to ignorance, not knowing. As soon as you start knowing, then you start unraveling what it is. Okay. I'm talking about enlightenment teachings to a certain degree, not a particular religion, but enlightenment teachings. See, clear, knowing that we are consciousnesses that are capable of greater consciousness. See, it's just theoretical, hypothetical sort of proposition, but that's what is awareness. You need to be aware of things. See, what do you need to be aware of and at what level in order to make your life better and happier? Guns? Not really. Yeah. They have their place. Weapons have their place.
And yet what I'm getting from what you're saying is that really the violence, psychic violence, can occur very early, even between mother and child, with seemingly no violence occurring at all. And real damage.
Sure, the violence has roots in, let's say, earth nature. Earth nature. So that's why I say, we have to slow down and see where we come from, and see to what extent where we come from is conducive to happiness or unhappiness. Okay. Fear, it's not happiness. Okay. Creative intelligence can recognize that and make changes accordingly. See, to undo the unhappiness and bring in happiness. And of course that's relative. We need to have common ground about what happiness is. But that's why the education has to start as early as possible to get to the solutions. And that happiness is not things you have. We have to understand it's not peeps you have. That's not happiness. Those are things you have. Those are peeps you have. That's not happiness. And because you have, that if it's what you have that is happiness, then what you don't have is unhappiness. And that's not what happiness is. Happiness without question, happiness without other, is true happiness. That means you're being happy. You gotta be happy.
And is that kind of happiness only available, let's say, on an individual?
Only when you understand it. When you get there, then you know what it is. It's not given. It has to be awakened to. You awaken to it in a culture where awakening to it is what is real.
Does that happiness equate with mastery?
Their happiness is part of mastery, yes, to a certain degree. It's part of it. But real mastery, real happiness, and real freedom are basically related, fundamentally related. You need the freedom to be happy, and you need the happiness, that comes with freedom. See? They're related. See? And then we're talking about expansion of intelligence, which is mastery, which is happiness, and which is freedom at the same time, which then is love. See? You need freedom for love. You need the freedom to love, see? Openness. See? And then love, when you get to that level, it's key to wisdom. See? And then you come to a cosmic understanding of sameness, which is part of the wisdom mind. See, then it's a more universal reality at the heart level. And what we're talking about is going from the animal level to the heart level. Not emotional level. That's part of the animal level. But higher, intelligence level. That's part of the heart level. Yeah, master level. Mind mastered. See, self mastered. See, thought mastered. Body mastered. World mastered. Freedom mastered.
And so, what impact or effect does this kind of happiness have on other beings in the world? Does it permeate through? The more happy people, the more...
What do you think? Some of this is common sense, so you should be able to answer it on the spot.
Well, I think some of it is examples are provided and people are dealt with, and so it does permeate. But I'm also thinking of someone who is more or less in silence. Does their condition improve the rest of the world? Yes, I think it does. So-called silent master.
Silence speaks for itself. Silence is a plus. But even that has its conditions. So be aware that silence has its conditions. Silence is transcendent reality at once, and then silence in terms of quietness is just another condition. And we're talking about going beyond conditions at some point, but being able to wisely use all conditions, see, to make things work for one's people, and then collectively, so that fear is more or less undermined, so that there's more cooperation, universal cooperation between people, which is the wisest approach to it, so that there is much more, let's say, integration of peeps and integration of intelligence, and the effort that intelligence requires in order to solve the problems of the planet. It means cooperation. There has to be something very intelligent going on to provoke the right kind of cooperation. When it's too political, then you have a diminishment of what's really, really necessary. Politics generates and breeds politics. Selfishness breeds selfishness and just hardens everybody, closes everybody down, makes things impossible to happen in a collective, cooperative, or spiritual manner.
So what I get from that is that a master, by not going out to help the world, is in fact helping the world, whereas someone who's got all the do-gooder attitudes and inspiration may not be helping anything at all.
Well, that's our viewpoint. It's viewpoint. Master's not interested in being in the world or being out of the world. So in or out of the world is not relevant to a master. Master just is what it is. A master will do what it needs to do, what it's moved to do. That depends on the master's karma. I'd say like the basic machinery that master has to work through. Say karma. See, as creator. See, karma as let's say means to something. See, to accomplish something. To means to an end. See, transformation. So the master has to do that first within itself as itself. Whether or not it brings it to the world depends on its function. It doesn't matter how it works with or without the world. The master could be a politician, maybe. It's not afraid of being anything in the world because it is the world, but it's beyond the world at the same time. So the master's a paradox. It's not about the role it plays. It's not about that. It's not limited or defined or determined by any of that. Master's subtle intelligence, but it's graceful and majestic at the same time, and healing and liberating.
So is, let's say, mastership thrust on people unasked in a sense, or is it always the result of a desire to
It has
develop?
nothing to do with desire. People can desire mastery, and their desiring may keep it away from them. See? Because they're then bringing to it something that is not what it is. It's not desiring. See? So ignorance then is the cause of the suffering in any and every case. Ignoring something. See? We're not talking about pain, suffering, we're talking about suffering. Anguish, psychic, emotional, psychological suffering, self-created suffering, or something which has to do with the mind on a mechanical level, in terms of memory. People have memories of suffering experience, and they can't get free of that. So they have to learn how to step above the mind, because the mind is just one layer or one track of consciousness. They have to get beyond it. There are many, many levels. So we have to get beyond it by recognizing what it is as a level. And because it's a level of consciousness, say, well, it shows up sometimes and disappears other times, gives us a better understanding of the fact that there are many levels of consciousness, and certainly the void is one of those levels of consciousness. Nirvana is one of those levels of consciousness that you can slip in and out of once you know what it is.
So is self-created suffering an illusion, or is it merely a level?
What's an illusion?
Not real.
Well, what isn't an illusion?
Okay.
Someone's awareness may be a fact, but it depends on what they are using and applying their awareness to, and more or less focusing on, that determines what are the conditions that are the result of that focus, result of that, say, attention, result of that preoccupation or consideration. Thing in this world is cause and effect, so we have to understand the laws of cause and effect. Okay. What is cause and what is effect, and so on and so forth. Basic preliminary operations, see, of consciousness. And the nature of influences, so it's not really an easy proposition, it's a complex proposition. So there are many areas, many different facets that have to be brought to the people who have the need for the education, and then that has to be organized, systemized to such a degree where we start to understand the true nature of mind, so everybody has to get their degree of psychology. But then has to be also esoteric psychology, where there's also teaching about the no mind as well. The soul, which is no mind. It's no self. Yeah. You have to know what soul is. Yeah. As used symbolically as awareness, consciousness, awakeness. See? Awakeness. Buddha nature, or Hyuda nature. See? Awake as sound, not just awake as awake. Awake beyond awake. See? Yeah.
So how would you put that in terms of attention or intention?
What's the difference?
Well, I'm trying to get at that. I mean,
What's the difference? You have the two words there. What's the difference?
one seems to be awareness, attention, and the other seems to be putting it into some kind of action.
Good enough for now. Next.
So is that part of, let's say, the mastery process, going from awareness to recognition of action, finding a path or a course? In other words, do you choose things, or do they choose you, in a sense?
Works both ways. Works both ways. Depends on which end of the stick you're willing to be at. See, as effect or cause, as object or subject. See, so it works both ways. It's all inclusive. So it's also in between. It's also beyond. Yeah. So all of that is part of what needs to be communicated to peeps in terms of the potential to be aware of awareness, the potential to be aware as object, the potential to be aware as subject, the potential to be aware as no awareness. So all of the layers relative to knowing and not knowing have to be addressed properly in the process. And at the same time, people have to be free, let's say, to become their occupational specialty, become doctors, become these functions of intelligence that show up as services for other humans. So we have to be free to be all the things that people are, but to be beyond all the things that people are at the same time. So if we are more than that, we can be more than that. And that's like going back to an original principle of being the spirit, right? Being the source. Every one of us is the spirit at the same time, not completely realized as spirit and functioning as spirit, but we feel connected to what spirit is, life force, see, life. Plagued by the conditions of our birth and life pattern relative to our family, karma, and all the rest of that society and culture, but at the same time, more than that. We have to have some access to the more than that. And that's like the primary focus of what spiritual education is about. That there's more than that. So whatever you perceive it is, it's more than that. So it's not a thought. It's not even a word. See, it's a universe. You have to get back to your proper resonance with the universe at large. See, the whole thing. Totality. See, intelligence.
This would seem to get back to what you were saying a little bit earlier about undoing. Identity seems to be one of those things that needs to be undone for people so that they can do a task but not be a this or a that or limited to an identity based on the work they do.
Well, it's already undone. See? And that's what you need to do, is get to the undoneness of it all. See? It's already done. And that's a paradox, see? Because it's the already done that keeps the doing going on. Just as the already doing is only possible because of what's already undone.
And do you think, exposing people to this kind of paradoxical insight?
Wisdom, yeah. Wisdom, yeah.
Is that something that could be offered to society at large, or is that something for the few?
In small measure, yes, the society can be brought up. I mean, it's being brought up by technologic sort of superstition at this point. If you don't have these gadgets, you're not a good person. You're not worthy of being on our team. So you gotta have the same garbage, gadgets, in order to survive out here. You gotta be subject to the same consumerism. Sins of consumerism. You have to be duped into buying all this junk that because everybody's bought into it, you have to keep up with. See? And that's a lie, but it's a functional lie. It's a lie that's keeping things going for peeps. See? Are we any better off? No, we're doing more relative to the technology that's come up that has been imposed on everybody because they've been made to believe they absolutely need it. See? Nobody's any better for it. People are doing more. They're proving to themselves they can do and adapt more. Nobody's any better. There's no less war. There's no less complications and madness going on in terms of violence. So it has really made very, very little dent except in terms of industry and how that measures productivity and what have you at a material level. In terms of our, say, technical capacities as humans, but that's being exploited, maybe to good reason and good use, but there's a spiritual exploitation that we need just as badly at this point to balance that out. Right? Bring out the heart in life, bring out the spiritual, sense of the sacred, instead of the carelessness, of a barbarianistic sort of state of mind in a world that, whether you call it American, is really beneath the, let's say, the majesty of what Mastership is about. Whether you're talking about Freemasonry as a form or system to get to mastery, or yoga as a form and system to get to mastery, or any other occult schools that work with, let's say, some kind of scalar system to get you to selfless, more spiritual realization. These are useful scales, systems to use, processes to undergo that point in the direction of being a fully realized heart being. So you need a model like that, because you can't exist, you can't evolve without models. People are always looking to somebody else for something or other. Maybe better or wiser than themselves. And it's kind of a hang-up that people have. Instead of looking inside, where all of what you see outside comes from, you should settle for just looking outside, and for no good reason. Whereas you can have teachers that will take you to a certain place, very seldom, but definitely possible, be taken to a place where you're liberated, actually liberated from yourself and your self-search.
It would seem now that rather than the focus being on looking at oneself or looking even at teachers who provide good models, it's just at the tools themselves. So we have more tools for communication and less communication coming out of it, it would seem,
Well, it's not about communication coming out of it, it's less realization about anything. So we're talking about all of this stuff, it's a distraction. See, it's great distraction. It is distraction. It is distracting. See, that's its purpose, is to distract you. See, from higher things, see, higher wisdom, higher understanding. See, it's like to take you away from the Christ energy. See, take you away from the Buddha energy. See, these are different forms of the same energy. See, higher intelligence, brilliance. See, take you away from the brilliance. Keep you enmeshed in, mixed into darkness. See, unhappiness. See, running around like a chicken without your head. See, subject to time, a time slave, a slave of time. See, and the dollar. See, time for the dollar of time. Materialism, anchored down, gravity. See, and pretending that that's happiness because it's all you have. Whatever you have is not happiness.
So it seems, to paraphrase something you said in one of your books, people who use technology are ultimately used by technology.
Not ultimately, just basically. Yeah. Ultimately, there's no technology. There's no technology. Technology is something that comes and goes. You have catastrophic events going on here on the planet in the near future or whatever. Technology, as we know, doesn't exist. You got to come up with some other technology. Try to recover the same technology if you have no better technology. Because we've lost the technology of knowing without the technology. Doing without the technology. We've lost that. We've disinherited it because we allow distraction to overwhelm us and take control. Say consumerism is taking control. And it doesn't have to be bad consumerism. Some things are great to have. But making that the end be all of your intelligence, your focus, and your ambitions, I think is part of the problem. Short-sightedness, small-mindedness.
Well, it would seem like, in a sense, the technology is running unchecked because there's no higher wisdom guiding its application and use. So it's for its own sake and therefore for nobody's sake.
Well, that's for everybody's sake. Yeah, for everybody's sake. Right? To keep everybody in a certain place and feeling that they're capable of doing certain things. That's the whole, I guess you might say that's the hype. So you do more, you do better, and you can do more, and you do better, see? But that's not enough. Yeah. Because that's not humanizing you. It's technicalizing you, yeah, so technologically, speaking. See? You're just becoming more technically capable of things. Yeah. So it's educational, but it's materializing at the same time. But that doesn't mean it's a limit. See? So you have to then refer to or rely on more spiritual instincts so that you can be more technologically, right, let's say technical, and in your respective sense and requirement in your function as a human being in regards to the society as it is, the world at large. But you don't have to give up spiritual intelligence in the process. So that's what we're talking about. Assuring spiritual intelligence as the basis for everything else that happens is the key to the kind of education I'm talking about.
Well, that makes perfect sense, and it's proven by its absence in the results that we get, or by taking spiritual intelligence and making it religious and and focused and at the expense of others, or excluding
You
others.
mean politically?
Yes.
Politicalizing it. Oh, we politicalize everything as human nature, but it's not necessary. It's a certain level of, let's say, operation. It's a level of operation. It's a grade of vibrational interaction with the universe. It's this type of resonance, a level of resonance, a quality of resonance. Yeah. It's not the truth. It's just where you're at in the moment, and you're subject then, because you're being in the moment, conditioned by the moment, then you're subject to knowing more or less, depending on what's coming next. Yeah. That you're either prepared for or not prepared for, relative to what you created for your changes. Your own progression or digression, or regression in this case. People are here to regress and progress. Sometimes at the same time, sometimes at more or less definitive times you're regressing because of bad news and so on, and progressing because of good news.
So then, what is, let's say, the answer in the sense of stepping outside of this technological morass and getting some quiet, some perspective?
It's not that you need quiet either. It's not about quiet. You have to find quiet in the noise. So it's not about one thing or the other. It's not about schism. See, this is not about the schism. It's about collapsing the schism. It's not making the schism. See, balancing things out so that there is no schism. Not producing schism. That's not the solution. Talk about the spiritual as a theoretical concept, and the material is a theoretical concept. Not to do away with that. So it's not about one or the other. We are fulfilling our potential, which means those two things are integrated into non-distinct realities. So you're just being balanced. And so the idea of being one way or the other too much or too little disappears. Then there's what we might call then stasis of harmony.
So that's kind of a way of being that you carry through all conditions, as opposed to the conditions defining you.
It's just a way of being, period. Despite conditions, without conditions, a way of being unconditionally.